Cracking the case in 30 seconds. He's hot! Blowing the pins in 5!
I want everyone at their station.
Everyone, sir?
Everyone. And Cortana. Let's give our old friend a warning.
I've already begun.
Halo Combat Evolved, a title released in 2001 of November 15th, a game so influential that it created a multi-billion-dollar game franchise, revolutionized the FPS genre, and is easily considered the biggest reason as to why Microsoft and the Xbox were able to have a long-lasting legacy in the video game industry. Halo 1 defines the word evolved. Its reputation, big and iconic name, critical and commercial success, the gameplay, awesome soundtrack, great story and sequel builder, the sandbox, vehicles, the setting and environment, graphics, split-screen co-op, LAN parties, and a good old pure form of arena multiplayer. There are many reasons why Halo CE is the highest rated video game on the Xbox, why it was labeled a killer app, and why it coined the phrase/term Halo Killer. There's a reason why Master Chief has become an iconic video game character, household name in the face of the Xbox.
And it's only available on Xbox, and it's the thing that everybody's excited about, then they're going to go out and buy Xboxes.
Microsoft's development team, Bungie, provides the must-have game for the season.
Every single bit of Halo lore, media, game, book, comic, Halo-themed console toy, accessory, Halo-themed controllers spawned off this game. 13 games, over 50 copies sold, over 20 novels, etc. It takes nothing more than a masterpiece to create an entire franchise of this scale. However, is all this praise and success still relevant? And does Halo 1 still hold up 20 years later? And what about some of the things that are not so liked, such as reused areas, flood, or the damn library? Does Halo CE, a game that is now officially 20 years old, worthy of being called, a masterpiece or a legend? Some things you also gotta note, mainly for back then, was the current state of the video game industry in 2001. 2. We can, but it is sort of hard to judge Halo CE by today's standards. However, I can compare it to modern day games for reasons I'll explain later down the line. However, this was the first ever Halo game. So, nobody nor Bungie knew that this game would even be successful at all. With all that out of the way, let's fly a Pelican straight into this.
The Covenant believe that what they call the Silent Cartographer is somewhere under this island.
Now, I'll be honest with you guys. Playing this game for the first time a year ago, almost two, I wasn't so akin to starting off a game with a cutscene. And one that is so good and gives off so much, the player needs to know just starting off the game and sets the tone and setting. Before playing games like these, I was used to playing games like the Half-Life series. More specifically, the expansion Blue Shift, where I was introduced to the game via a tram ride. It was a decent show-don't-tell type of introduction, but I'll be honest, over time it seemed kinda lame compared to what I first witnessed in Halo CE's introduction. Not that those intros are bad, just that I haven't seen anything really different until I saw CE's introduction. The first cutscene shows what's important. A mysterious space ring, the giant ship known as the Pillar of Autumn, and the characters on board. The great soundtrack at the beginning creates a sense of mystery, which is great specifically and especially for first impressions. And first impressions, I'll tell you, are everything. Then we see a scene where soldiers and artillery are preparing for battle, and you get one of the greatest opening speeches of all time.
You heard the lady. Move like you got a purpose.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Once again, it is our job to finish what the flyboys started. We are leaving this ship platoon and engaging the Covenant on solid ground. When we meet the enemy, we will rip their skulls from their spines and toss them away laughing. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir!
Mm-hmm. Damn right I am. Now move it out. Double time.
Attention all personnel. We are re-engaging the enemy. External and internal contact imminent.
All you greenhorns who wanted to see Covenant up close, this is gonna be your lucky day.
Within a few minutes, you get the idea that this will be an epic sci-fi FPS surrounding a mysterious Halo ring, and that's pretty much what it is. And I really do love the whole show don't tell thing. It really immerses you in this game's universe better, unlike a certain other game.
Fire Team Osiris. Over the last 72 hours, 5 colonies have experienced identical events. Massive destruction, Forerunner and Origin.
During every cutscene and second of gameplay, Halo sets a different understandable tone and feeling every time via visuals, sound design, and music. Marty O'Donnell is simply amazing with his work, and the soundtrack in Halo CE is timeless, just like the other Halo titles. And the pacing fits these well. The soundtrack will not always be playing throughout the game, and only plays in the right moments, and every bit of the OST reflects a certain theme: terror, action, escape, beauty, etc. And I like that it isn't playing all the time, otherwise it wouldn't feel right and would feel a lot more repetitive and not as memorable. So those moments when you do hear the music are more memorable and impactful. But it's not just the cutscenes or music that makes this game so great and influential. It's the controls. It's absolutely perfect. These controls are so damn natural that you won't even be thinking about them throughout your playthrough. It's balanced and reliable in every sense, which means that any mistake the player makes is their fault, something a lot of games to this day still haven't learned from. Halo CE, as we all know, wasn't the first FPS, however it was the first FPS to bring super unique and fluid controls to the console market. It made shooters accessible to casual players that didn't own a PC. The controls set a good standard for the Halo series and the video game industry in the future. Most FPS games before Halo had you carrying a large arsenal of weapons and moving very fast, and had extra ways of mobility via rocket jumping and bunny hopping. And to try and fit all that on a controller back in the day, especially, would be nearly impossible, and wouldn't be as fun as playing such titles with a controller over a mouse and keyboard. And the Duke controller back then was actually considered a laughingstock, as not only is it fat as hell, but aiming and playing with 2 control sticks at the time was considered insane. And Halo limits the player to only 2 weapons. Back then, if you wanted to switch to a weapon of your choice, you have to cycle through a menu. But here, you switch with the push of a button of your choice. And if you didn't like the default control scheme, Bungie made it so you can change it to a different preset of your liking. It's amazing how if you pretty much play any modern shooter today, its roots can be traced back to Halo. How many FPS games nowadays have a 2-weapon limit, regenerating health, focus on great AI? It's insane to think about how many other things it revolutionized in the console market, such as LAN parties, split-screen co-op campaign, system-link gaming, and having an expansive and immersive story when most games back then had none or didn't exactly have much. I'm gonna be honest, to this day, Halo's gameplay and difficulty, if anything, hold up really well to this day. It's very well balanced and challenging, and the chance you'll die to something completely out of your control is straight up non-existent here. Well, almost non-existent. And I love the fact that it's challenging and difficult, yet actually fun. It does difficulty better than any other Halo game in my opinion, and better than most FPS titles out there. In this game, there's no need for respawning enemies, making enemies challenging only because they have a big health bar, or only because they'll just keep throwing spam enemies at you. Is challenging to play through a game with those types of things? Sure, but is it really that fun? Which ties into the AI. How many games nowadays, especially in the FPS scene, do you see that have AI that is like a chess game? If you're thinking the answer is a lot, your answer is quite mistaken. A lot of games nowadays, I seem to notice, have that trend of just having enemies that just stand in one spot and waiting to get shot. And it just makes for AI and even campaigns that are straight forgettable gameplay-wise, and usually even as a whole. And Halo's enemies make for a great chess game. But before I get into the more juicy bits of the AI, I just want to say that I absolutely love how everything is telegraphed. It gives you a chance to strategize via sound cues.
Here comes the grunty punishment!
Visual cues like when elites and grunts can point at you when they see you, and when they throw grenades it has a clear animation. Same with vehicles, and pretty much 99% of Halo CE's enemy cast. And I love how every type of enemy has a certain color code for how, threatening they are, I guess you could say. Like, for example, the red grunt is clearly more powerful than the usual color grunt, and the red elites are clearly more powerful than the blue elites, and sword elites are identified in yellow, and which are clearly more powerful than just your regular invisible sword elite. And as for the cast of enemies, as I said before, they make Halo feel challenging like a chess game, and every enemy not only has its strengths, but also has an exploitable weakness. Grunts are the cannon fodder, and are rather weak alone and can be taken out with a simple headshot. However, they have strength in numbers, and if you get sloppy, they can eventually kill you, and they can also carry heavy weapons and toss grenades. And they also run in terror if their elite is killed. Jackals have shields, and are good at defense and especially in numbers. They pose a threat and can kill you rather quickly if you decide to push up without a plan in mind. However, you can bypass them if you take out their shield with your weapon of choice, or you can shoot their hand that happens to be exposed through the shield, and expose their head in that way, giving you a chance to headshot them. Elites are meant to be your equal. They are smart, cunning, have shields that can also regenerate. They can even carry swords and be invisible. And the sword elites will often yell, so you know if they are present. And they, like grunts, can throw grenades. Hunters are tanky mini-bosses, mini-boss-like enemies that also have a powerful fuel rod cannon. However, their melee attack is rather slow and can be outmaneuvered for a shot to their unarmored back. And the Flood is all about swarming the player. They come in great numbers and can carry weapons of all kinds usually. Some are about CQC. And some even have one that can explode, dealing damage to the player if close enough, and also releasing Flood infection forms upon exploding. However, the Flood, you have the ability to shoot off their limbs, removing their ability to shoot and melee. And Sentinels are flying enemies that shoot lasers and are dangerous in numbers. As for the gameplay, in combination with the enemies, create a game where not one strategy is the best strategy. The game encourages the player to think outside of the box in order to progress, and I love it. For example, human weapons are better at taking out unshielded enemies, but struggle against taking out enemy shields. However, plasma weapons, while not great at taking out unshielded targets, are great for taking out shields. So it's great for taking out sentinels. Elites obviously because, well, they're shielded targets, and jackals as well. However, they're not so great against enemies like hunters and flood. The rocket launcher is good against everything, but its ammo is limited. The sniper is useful against every enemy type except the flood. And I like this design, as it actually makes the player think, what weapons do I use for this situation? What routes do I take? What enemies should I take out first and which ones last? It turns the game into a nice little combat dance of sorts. Turrets can be used by just about any enemy and yourself. So if you see a turret, you gotta make sure that no enemy gets to it, or maybe you should just occupy it yourself. I also love how changing the difficulty doesn't just change the health and damage of enemies, but certain areas, if not all, are usually changed in the way of enemies it gives you. One area might have an invisible sword elite on heroic and lower, slightly lower, yeah, but a golden elite on legendary. Ranks of enemies usually get higher, or combinations of enemies will change. Hell, I even really love the fact that even things like the final cutscene will be different on legendary. I also love the amount of personality given to your marine allies and your enemies. They all have so much dialogue in them and really gives them and the game an everlasting charm that not a lot of games today usually do. Not one I'll make long, but something I wanted to talk briefly about is the fact that you can go anywhere in this game. I'm talking about going out of the map. There are so many videos and stuff of people just breaking the boundaries and uncovering very interesting secrets. I really love this, as this isn't present in video games today, like, at all. And the newer Halo games usually have invisible barriers or kill barriers. And I always felt it really limits creativity in the game, in my opinion. You can't break boundaries or see some things you might want to see in most games nowadays. But not here. Here, you can pretty much go anywhere with tricks. Even some more simple ones like throwing a grenade at a warthog and then getting in it and watching it fly. I could go on. But the point is, the game allows for a lot of creativity outside of the base game like this, and I love it. Now we talk about level design. Good to even awesome gameplay is nothing without levels to play in. And Halo Z has some of the best level design. You can tell these developers really put a lot of effort and passion into these levels. Of course, there are reused areas, but I'll cover that in a bit actually. Each mission feels different from the last and offers something new to the formula. It doesn't just foolishly reveal something, everything actually, in the first two missions. No, that would be unfair, not to mention fun. It wouldn't be fun at all. As you go through each level, you encounter something new. Whether it's new enemies like sword elites, spec ops elites, fuel rod grunts, hunters, etc. Each level has something new that the previous mission did not. And it keeps your interest throughout the game, and is also a good example of pacing. First level is basically a tutorial teaching you how to throw grenades, melee, and as you simply going through corridors shooting. Second level lets you roam wherever you want, and opens up, of course. Also, the level everyone is comparing Halo Infinite to. Then you're introduced to new enemies and weapons. Enemies like banshees, dropships, jackals, and other types of new toys like the warthog and sniper. Third mission introduces stealth and also gives you more sniper ammo than the normal sniper ammo limit. And the level will throw enemies on turrets at you, as well as hunters and invisible elites and sword elites. I love how open each of these levels are as well, multiple paths to take. And the game has mostly linear maps, but they don't feel like it, because there are multiple routes you can take. And you don't need to do certain events in order to progress through the level. Now, how about reused areas? The criticism most people have had about Halo CE, while yes, I will agree, the levels looking the same certainly doesn't help, I find them to still be good, as while yes, they are reused, the encounters and things you do in these levels still feel different. Well, not feel, they are different. And these reused areas, in my opinion, are some of the best levels, and easily, this is the best way to reuse areas. Make them still different and more challenging. As for the library, I find that level to be an underrated gem, because while yes, further in it can be repetitive for certain, there's something unique and challenging of constantly being hunted by Flood. You gotta keep moving and fighting, otherwise you will get overwhelmed quickly, as Flood will constantly spawn in this level. They'll come from everywhere, behind you, in front, the left, and right as well. It keeps you in the Halo dance, constantly switching weapons on the fly and checking your surroundings. Every piece of Halo's combat puzzle, it put together perfectly in this level. It really is something I hated when I first played it, but over time I found it to be quite underappreciated, and it really shows how threatening the Flood are, as they may not have a lot of firepower or intelligence, but in numbers they really put up a challenge. And this level, the setting of this ancient Forerunner looking level that could have been a nice looking thing that's clean and resembles the Forerunners pretty well, has been overrun with Flood. How about the narrative and story itself? There's a big reason why Halo has such an expansive universe. Whether it's through games, comics, novels, TV shows, movies, you name it. And this game truly gave us a great start. And like I said before, this game planted the perfect foundation for a sequel. The way it set up the different things like Reach, the UNSC, the Covenant, the Halo Ring, and Forerunners really left a lot to be explained and explored in the Halo universe, which is what future games, comics, novels, etc., stuff I mentioned before, did in the future. A huge issue people always bring up is that it doesn't tell you everything. You don't know the origin of Master Chief, the Covenant, UNSC, and most things in this game. Well, in my opinion, I think it's good that they did this, as not only does it leave the door open for potential sequels, but it also just tells the player what they need to know. If we had exposition for everything like Flood, UNSC, Reach, etc., that would have removed all mystery and urgency at hand. We don't need to know all this stuff right from the get-go. We just gotta know what is presented at hand, and that's a good thing. It makes the game really feel like the first game in the series. Show things to the player, which leaves questions that also get solved in later games, leaving room for sequels. Master Chief has been criticized for being a quote-unquote flat and not explored well character, end quote. But it's not about Chief, it's about his journey through the game. Having him be a silent protagonist mainly through gameplay makes it so you can feel more immersed by the game itself, because you're not watching a movie and the events unfold like a movie, but rather you're playing through the events in a video game. Chief being mainly silent really helps you connect better with this universe and feel more immersed. The story of Halo CE, as expansive as it needs to be, some games have a story based on a setting rather than characters alone. CE is like this. The sights are clearly on this mysterious ancient ring. The conflicts on it, the events that take place, secrets. It's a story of mystery and discovery, uncovering mysteries of an ancient place with action-packed moments in contrast to quiet parts. Every bit of the story is told via the levels, and in my opinion this was a great approach to the first title in the series. It really has that show-don't-tell vibe to each level. The Flood reveal being easily the best example. You play through the entire level based on them, and it has no exposition from anybody for the most part. You just see Flood gathering bodies, dead bodies, Covenant running away from something, blood on the walls, etc. All to build up the hype of the Flood and tension. Weapons and stuff scattered everywhere, and you get the idea that something just ain't right around here. And once you encounter the Flood, then you realize all of those Covenant and UNSC that have been there are now part of the Flood. This level easily has some of the greatest storytelling in video game history, with little to no dialogue or exposition. Even humor, when it's presented, fits well in a universe that's built up to be pretty mysterious.
This thing is falling apart!
It'll hold.
We're not gonna make it!
We'll make it.
Pull up! Pull up!
You did that on purpose, didn't you? Oh, I see. The coordinate data.
The characters weren't exactly deep with things that go in depth about them, and that's because they didn't need to be like that for the first game in the series. All the characters have personality and play a role in CE's story, and nowadays, in the MCC, 343 Industries added terminals for more in-depth lore on these characters and factions, and if you really want it, in some locations. And that is why Halo CE's narrative/story became so big, and why it's so damn awesome even to this day. And games from today can still learn from this. Okay, now let's talk about Anniversary. Saber Interactive was brought in around Halo CE's 10th anniversary to remaster the game with updated visuals, graphics, lighting, and textures and updated models, and a remastered version of the game's soundtrack as well, and as game audio itself. It's alright in my opinion. In fact, I'll be honest, when I first played Halo CE, it was on the Master Chief Collection with the remastered graphics and audio. But then I went back and played it in classic graphics and realized that I was actually ruining game's original vision, tone, audio, and even a bit of the art style. Yes, I prefer the original graphics now, ever since then. Saber Interactive wanted to get in a bit of the Halo Reach art style into the game as well, which makes some sense since it's the prequel to Halo CE. But the environments, because of this and tension, just doesn't feel the same anymore. I won't go into full detail as many videos have already been done on this that I'd recommend watching. Might even link in the description. 343 Guilty Spark being probably the worst offender. Right off the bat, the outside area is supposed to look like a swamp. Now it's a rainforest in Anniversary. And speaking of this level, inside the area, as soon as you go down that elevator, the one with all the blood stuff, all the blood and more messed up looking walls on the elevator now look like they've been completely polished. And easily the worst offense here is the lighting. Yeah, the areas are so much brighter now, and this completely ruins the effect of the Flood reveal. This is going against everything we were trying to do with the original version of the game, as the darkness was supposed to heighten tension and fear in the player as they are exploring the level. The darker environments made the player feel more in danger and made the levels feel more mysterious. Now this has been completely ruined. Now when you encounter the Flood, it doesn't even feel as impactful here. Because with the combinations of the changes made to the lighting, blood, and everything else I mentioned before, the build-up is almost non-existent. And on the MCC, instead of just loading into the next level with a normal texture something as a loading background, instead, a picture of the whole damn level comes up instead, totally ruining any nice surprises or first impressions when getting loaded into the level. Anyways, like I said, I won't go into full detail about this, and if you want to know way more on this, go and check out the many videos made on the topic. I might even link some in the description below for you to check out. Halo CE's multiplayer is definitely fun to play and interesting to talk about. And it originally started in the form of LAN parties rather than online multiplayer, at least at first. Bungie had 3 different studios working on different titles until they made all 3 merge together and create the multiplayer in time for the Xbox's launch. Multiplayer was actually an afterthought. Needless to say, its multiplayer is the very definition of addicting. I had and still have so much fun with this game's multiplayer to this day. It feels so classic, retro, so 90s-like. Although the customization options are rather limited, auto-aim is less forgiving. Power-ups are in this game like overshields and other games like overshields and active camo, or at least like other classic games. And maybe more, maybe I'm missing some. But yeah, power weapons spawn on the map frequently and has the fastest kill time thanks to the damn pistol. The pistol is easily considered one of the most ridiculously overpowered handguns in all of gaming. In Halo CE, this thing is overpowered at all ranges. In CE, even more overpowered than the damn assault rifle at close range, I seem to notice. And that weapon is meant specifically for close-range combat. In the campaign, it's not very great against some of the game's tougher elites because of their ridiculous shielding. In multiplayer, however, it's a 3-shot kill if you can aim well enough. I can understand why some people may be turned off by the fact a pistol is capable of killing people rather quickly like that. But I'm more accepting of it, as not everyone can pull off a 3-shot kill consistently. Only the most skilled players can do it consistently, as you should know after playing for a while that you've got to really time your shots more carefully to kill players more quickly. Every weapon, including power weapons, involves leading your shots on moving targets. And because of this, most battles in Halo 1 are fast AF, but super tense because of how quickly tables can turn in favor of another combatant. Someone who fires the first shot and fast may draw first blood, but someone who times their shots well can easily turn the tide in their favor and win that battle. And this is a mechanic and staple that exists in pretty much every Halo title made from Bungie. Another thing I like about Halo 1 that is so 90s is how well it handles timers and spawns. Every item on a map is set to a fixed timer that will spawn the item regardless of when it's been picked up. If the shotgun has been picked up 4 seconds before it's supposed to spawn, there's no stopping or resetting the timer. A new shotgun will respawn no matter what. However, my only issue with the spawns is that for players, it's completely broken. Maps have only so many spawn locations, and most of the time you'll spawn within close proximity of your teammates. However, if he or she blocks your spawn, you'll spawn anywhere. And yes, even in the middle of combat. This is why this is so broken, as players can easily exploit this, and for competitive play, in my opinion, this is way too cheesy, and can get players easy wins because of how predictable it is. And in my opinion, is unacceptable. But that's just how things are for a mode that was basically an afterthought, I guess. And despite there being no sprint in this game, the map design and weapon variety makes up for that. And I swear, Halo CE has some of the most iconic maps ever in the whole series, despite being quote-unquote simple, end quote. But that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. So influential that many of them have been remade in other Halo games countless times. Blood Gulch, the BTB map, is one of the best Halo maps to this day, and even being the map Red vs. Blue was first featured on. And being known for having 2 bases of Warthogs and its creative and wide open play area. Chill Out is another tiny map, but it makes up for its size with its masterful design. Each of the handful of rooms is interconnected with open windows, teleporters, and vertical platforms. Enemies can come from almost anywhere, so there's always a feeling of forward momentum. creating aggressive plays that speed up Halo CE's supposedly slow pace. Derelict, in a standard 2v2 or 4v4 matchup, Halo CE's best maps are typically symmetrical arenas with easy-to-learn power weapon locations. Derelict combines this setup with the vertically of a map like Prisoner. To achieve victory, players need to both stay on top of the map and keep the best sight lines and secure the rockets, sniper rifle, and active camo before the enemy team. Hang's High is a map that feels perfectly designed for sniper rifle use, along with pretty much every other weapon in Halo Combat Evolved's arsenal, with power weapons soared high above the action on exposed catwalks. Every attempt to gain an advantage creates more tension. Players can easily pick off opponents with a pistol from either base, but there's generally nowhere to hide once a shot misses. I could go on, but those are easily some of the greatest maps in the series, in my personal opinion, not to mention in Halo CE. These maps easily provide a variety of fun ways to play and encourage players to learn Halo CE's combat dance more and more. Halo CE's multiplayer, in my honest opinion, yeah, it has its flaws, of course, but not only is it fun, but it's unique from other shooters, especially from back in 2001. And being so revolutionary, it's hard to think about, from split-screen multiplayer and LAN parties to other things I mentioned before. Its multiplayer changed the video game industry as we know it today, and the FPS genre. Even 20 years later, Halo CE is still a wonderful special game that had such an impact on the video game industry. The impact it had on console FPS and the FPS genre in general, as well as the soundtrack, immersive levels, great story, expansive gameplay, great sandbox, great enemy design and story and art style, multiplayer, and so much more. The influence it had on the entire Halo franchise and the groundwork it laid for future Halo titles, and the elements it left for future FPS titles to take advantage of, the way it made Xbox one of the greatest selling brands and consoles of all time, and how its elements are still being used in modern day games of this generation. It's next to impossible to not class this game as one of the GOATs in FPS history. A game this well designed and made deserves all the praise that it gets from critics and fans alike. And the fact that people are still talking about it, the fact that the game has been ported to 4 different platforms and was remastered, just shows how well Halo holds up and its more deserved status, and how it holds up 20 years later. Halo CE, like all masterpieces, has its flaws, but it's as close to perfect as it can possibly get. Though I really wish we could have gotten something more than just a console for its 20th anniversary and controller. Seriously, it's not just 20 years of Halo CE, after all, it's 20 years of the whole franchise, for fuck's sake.
We move now, we can make it.